Hey everybody! We are on chapter 24 of The Magic Misfits, the second story today. We're quite a ways through the story at this point, and we're at a pretty exciting point in the story. So, rewinding a little bit, during Sandra Santos's performance at the Grand Oak Resort, doing her psychic trick, she revealed that how do I explain this? She was upset and distressed and didn't seem to want to reveal this, but she did anyway, that this couple on stage, the Varalikas, are the birth parents of Layla. So again, Layla was adopted by the Vernons. The Vernons weren't the ones that carried her in their tummy. Supposedly the Varalikas were, or that's what they're claiming. They're saying, we are your birth parents, this woman is the one that carried you in her belly. So then the Varalikas decided that they were going to hire a lawyer to try to basically take Layla back as their daughter, which was a really scary situation for Layla because, these people were supposedly related to her, and so maybe she'd want to get to know them as part of her family, but she loved the Vernons and she loved her misfit friends, and she doesn't want to just be taken away from them, right? So this was a very overwhelming, scary situation. They Layla, Carter, Mr. Dante Vernon, and the other Mr. Vernon all go to this office to meet with the lawyer and the Varalikas. And while they're there, Carter realizes that he recognizes there's two lawyers in the room. He recognizes them as frown clowns from Bozo's old crew. And so he's messaging Layla by tapping Morse code, dot, dot, dash, dash, on his chair. And Mr. Dante Vernon picks up on it as well. And they get up to try to leave. And what happens? Well, the lawyers and the Varalikas all stand up and block their way from the door and say, "You're not going anywhere." So basically, we know now that the Varalikas are not related to Layla. They're scheming something, but the question is, what do they want? What are they trying to accomplish? So the prediction I made yesterday was, I remembered Bozo's monkey from the beginning of the book trying to steal Mr. Vernon's magic book. I wonder if it has something to do with that. Did you make a prediction? I wonder what it is. Well, let's see if our predictions are correct or not. I'm curious. But here's chapter 24. So the Carter, Layla, Mr. Dante Vernon, and the other Mr. Vernon are trying to leave this lawyer's office, but the lawyers and the Varalikas have blocked their path. So that's where we're at. They're the frown clowns from Bozo's circus, Carter cried out. I recognize the humming. And those aren't my real parents, Layla added, nodding to the Varalikas. They didn't know about my key. The Vernons didn't understand, but they trusted their daughter. They stepped between their children and the frown clowns. So if you remember, Layla asked the Varalikas about her key that was left with her when she was left at the orphanage as a baby. And the Varalikas didn't know anything about it, which proved to Layla that they can't be her parents, they can't be related to her because her parents left her that key. The four villains glanced at one another and smirked. Aren't you kids just the smartest? The small man sneered, pulling his black mustache off his top lip and tossing it aside. Quiet, Tommy, said Mr. Varalika. You don't want to give 'em big heads. Grabbing his toupee from his scalp, he added, Good Lord, this thing is itchy. Step aside, said the other Mr. Vernon, his fists squeezed tightly. We don't want anyone to get hurt here. Our boss would kill us if we were to let you go so soon, said Mrs. Varalika, removing a smaller club from her purse before stepping forward and forcing the group back into the depths of the office. Who do you think their boss is? It couldn't be Bozo, right? Because he's supposed to be in jail. I don't know. Do you have any predictions? Your boss? Carter asked. You mean Bozo escaped from jail? Bozo? Asked Falsk with a laugh. That old clown was never in charge of anything or anyone. No, I don't believe you've yet met our true leader. Your true leader? Layla repeated, her usual confidence suddenly flooding back into her body. Now that she knew these folks were frauds, it was easier to talk back to them. Who might that be? The four former frown clowns only chuckled. Interesting. So these guys are claiming that Bozo was never the one who was really in charge. There was Bozo had a boss that was higher than him. Mr. Vernon whipped his hand over his head and then brought it down quickly. All of a sudden, smoke was rising from the floor, swirling around the family, hiding them from the villains. Quick, follow me. But before Layla could move, she felt herself being yanked backward. She yelped, calling through the smoke, Dad! Papa! Help! The fake lawyer's voice boomed out as he held Layla's arm behind her back. If you want to keep the girl safe, you'll stop where you are. As the smoke dissipated, Mr. Vernon raised his hands in surrender. The Varalikas flanked them. The fake lawyer nodded toward the doorway at the back of the room. Move it, all of you, into the basement, and no funny business. A flight of stairs led down into shadow. Falsk shoved them all forward. Layla was the last through, and she thought almost fondly of the closet at Mother Margaret's home. Being locked in a closet by bullies was far better than being mishandled by sinister frown clowns. Kitty, careful. Come in. Layla nearly stumbled down the steps, but her fathers caught her. From the top of the stairs, the fake lawyer called to them. We would have tied you up, but we saw what Layla can do to a knot. Let's see her escape a basement, though. The four villains waved, then shut the door. Moments later, the door shuddered as they hammered nails into the frame. Shadows filled Layla's vision at the bottom of the steps. Her fathers were immediately at her side, kneeling and hugging her in the darkness. Mr. Vernon asked, Are you okay, dear? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Layla whispered. What about all of you? Don't worry about us, said the other Mr. Vernon. I'm sorry that we agreed to bring you two here. What a horrible mistake. The group huddled together. Layla's eyes were beginning to adjust when Carter pulled the trusty flashlight out of his satchel and flicked it on. Oh, my darling Clementine, whispered Carter, waving the light around the space, but the beam illuminated nothing. The walls were too far away. All those weeks ago, when Bozo's security first brought me into his circus trailer, one of those frown clowns was singing that song. It took me a while to make the connection. Nice work with the Morse code, you two, said Mr. Vernon. There are reasons I keep so many different kinds of books in the magic shop. And most of those reasons aren't because I mean to sell them. You can thank Ridley, said Layla, if we ever manage to escape. Her dad raised his eyebrows. What do you mean, if? You are Layla Vernon. You can escape anything. Footsteps clunked overhead. The former clowns were walking around. What are they up to? Carter asked. Are they going to hurt us? The other Mr. Vernon shushed him. Listen. A muffled voice said something like, Meet the others at the shop. Meet the others at the shop. Gotta find that book. So a muffled voice said something like, Meet the others at the shop. Gotta find that book. Then steps moved toward the front. There was a squeaking sound and a door slamming. Afterward, the eerie silence echoed through the old office. Meet the others at the shop. What shop do you think they're talking about? And then says, gotta find that book. What book do you think they're talking about? Both Mr. Vernons ran to the top of the stairs and pushed against the door. No luck. They nailed it shut, said the other Mr. Vernon. Layla's fathers came back down the stairs. Would you mind if I borrowed the light for a moment? Vernon asked. He took Carter's flashlight and searched the room. No windows, no shovels, no hammers or crowbars to punch through the door. A shame I don't have a large axe up my sleeve. Just then, the flashlight beam alighted on an empty bookshelf. Vernon went to examine it, then pushed it aside. Behind it, a rusted door was embedded into the building's stone foundation. Layla and Carter gasped. The other Mr. Vernon peered into the darkness. What's wrong? What do you see? Carter swallowed nervously. The door looks like one we discovered in the basement of the Grand Oaks Lodge 2 days ago. The symbol over the keyhole. Layla flinched, then quickly interrupted him. The map we found at the resort hinted that there are bootlegging tunnels under the town. She blinked at Vernon. But then you probably knew that already, since it was your map. My map? The one in the metal box buried under the stone floor of the lodge's abandoned wing, said Carter. Layla added, the one that was decoded by a cipher coin that magically appeared in our magic shop? A brief, impressed smile crossed Mr. Vernon's face. But that wasn't my map. The Emerald Rings map, then, said Carter. We thought that Layla's key would fit the lock, but it didn't. Layla felt like a clamp was suddenly crushing her temples. She wanted to squeeze Carter's wrist to tell him to shut his mouth, but it was already too late. Her fathers scrunched up their foreheads, confused. Key? Asked Mr. Vernon. What key? Carter clapped his hand over his mouth and glanced at Layla in horror. He knew he'd unleashed her secret. So if you recall, Layla hadn't told anyone about this key that had been left with her as a baby. She didn't even reveal it to her friends until they found that door under the Grand Oak Resort that led to these bootlegging tunnels. And it had the same symbol above the lock as on her key. And so she revealed the key to her friends, and they tested it out. But did it open the door? No, it didn't. But she hadn't yet told her dads, and Carter accidentally just gave away her secret. Is that what you were talking about upstairs, honey? Asked the other Mr. Vernon, when you wanted to know if those frauds knew anything about... Layla sighed and nodded. She felt exhausted from keeping this secret. It was way past time to let her parents in on what she'd kept to herself for so long. Proof of her past. Proof that her birth parents had thought enough of her to leave a memento, a hint of where she'd come from, of who she really was, of the person she was capable of becoming. Tugging at the string around her neck, she finally showed the key to her fathers. Mr. Vernon couldn't control his surprise. His jaw swiveled open like a trapdoor in a stage. Words came from her mouth, sounding to her like she was speaking from inside a dream. Dad, Papa, long before I met you, when someone left me on the steps of Mother Margaret's home, they placed this key in my bassinet. I've cherished it ever since. I never told you about it because, well, I didn't want you to think that I needed to be chained to my old life. I love you both very much, but I couldn't let this token go. I feel like sometimes it helps keep me safe. The men clasped hands, then hugged Layla close again. They nearly squeezed tears out of her. The Emerald Ring used that old skeleton Sorry. The Emerald Ring used that old skeleton key to access the tunnels and unlock the other doors around Mineral Wells, said Mr. Vernon. We kept it in a hiding place at the magic shop so that we could all use it whenever we wanted. Something about this statement struck a chime in Layla's head. Does that mean someone in the Emerald Ring is one of my biological parents? Interesting. So she finally reveals this key to her dads, and they're like, then Mr. Vernon is like, I know that key because that's the key that we used. The Emerald Ring, his old club of friends, used that key to access these tunnels under the city. So if Layla's biological parents left that key with her, Does that mean that it must have been someone from the Emerald Ring? Interesting. Mr. Vernon stared at her for a few seconds, gears turning, as if he was trying to think of a response. I don't know about that, Layla, he said finally, sincerely. For now, Layla let the question go. Let's see if the old thing still works. Mr. Vernon led the group toward the rusted door. We tried the key in a door at the Grand Oak the other day, said Carter. No luck. Layla stuck the key into the lock, and just as she expected, it did not turn. Ah, yes, said Mr. Vernon. But this is a special lock, and you are holding a special key. Layla felt her entire body buzz, as if her dad were about to share the secret of one of his most enigmatic tricks. She said, But it doesn't work. A key works only if you know how to use it, Mr. Vernon said. And a magician's key might be misleading. Misdirection, Layla whispered. She stared at the key, particularly the end with the ornamental club suited suit decoration. Perhaps it wasn't ornamental at all. She removed the string, then inserted the key in reverse. She removed the string, then inserted the key in reverse into the keyhole. This time, when she turned her wrist, the old rusted door let out a loud, metallic click, satisfying in every way, and the large door swung open. And that is the end of our chapter. So she took the key and turned it around and put it in the lock that way, and they were able to unlock the door. That's so exciting. So we've gotten some answers to some of our mysteries. We know the Varalikas are not who they say they are. They're not actually related to Layla. But they work for someone. We don't know who yet, but it's not Bazo. We know it's not Bazo. But they work for someone. And the question I kept asking was, well, what is it that they want? Why were they going through this whole process of trying to trick the Vernons into thinking that they were related to Layla? Like, what was the purpose of this? Well, while they were locked in the basement, we overheard something. To get to the shop and find the book. What shop are they talking about, and what book are they talking about? Do you have any ideas? I don't know, but while they were locked down in the basement, Layla revealed this key to her parents, and discovered that this key came from the Emerald Ring, Mr. Dante Vernon's magic club when he was a kid, which is very interesting because it came from the Emerald Ring, but then it was left with Layla as a baby by her biological parents. So that means her biological parents and the Emerald Ring seem to be connected. I don't know. Very interesting. It could be something else, but they seem to be connected. But yeah, so it looks like in the next chapter they're going to use those tunnels underneath the city to escape from this basement. So I'm excited to see what unfolds in the next chapter. Next time we will be reading chapter 25. So I will see you there. Bye, everybody.